Islanders, as well as foreign tourists, are waking up to another beautiful day in this tropical paradise. But none of them knows that this day will be so different from the previous ones. In the tourist resorts, people are getting ready for another festive day full of good food, drinks and comfort. Approximately 2 hours ago, a huge 9.3 magnitude earthquake occurred on the Burmese Indian subduction fault of the lithospheric plate, triggering deadly tsunami waves that devastated Indonesia's Aceh region and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in minutes, claiming tens of thousands of lives instantly. But at Sri Lanka, they didn't have the slightest idea that anything had happened. The island is 1,700 kilometers from the epicenter, and the inhabitants didn't feel the slightest tremor that would have told them that a disaster of epic proportions was coming. Meanwhile, the tsunami was already mercilessly approaching the shores of the island through the deep ocean at the speed of a jet plane. Friends, welcome to another video that is a part of a series of videos on the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's get to the new video now. Approximately 1.5 hours after the quake, strange things started to happen to the sea on the southeast coast of Sri Lanka. The water first began to swirl and shift strangely from side to side, eventually receding about 1 kilometer offshore. This intrigued the locals, who went to explore the exposed seabed, where they were fascinated by fish and other animals they don't normally see scurrying on dry land. Less than half an hour after low tide, the sea returned in the form of a small foamy flood that inundated the shore. The people, thanks to this first manifestation of the wave, had plenty of time to flee further about the shore. Moments later, a second wave rolled in, reaching heights of between 2 to 10 meters. The different wave heights were determined by the widely varying bathymetry of the bottom and also by the considerable variation in the shoreline. The waves were highest in the Galle area, where they reached heights of up to 12.5 meters, and overflow reached up to 1.5 kilometers offshore. The wave progression can only be imagined in this area, as there is no available footage of the approaching wave. However, it is assumed that the wave on the southeast coast was in the nature of a foamy swirling flood, as in other areas of Sri Lanka. Aerial images of the area show utter devastation and destruction. The wave gradually affected the entire eastern coast of Sri Lanka, but as it moved northwards, it had less effect than in the southern parts of the island. Here, in the south, the wave was extremely destructive, and in the Hambantota area, it reached a height of 11 meters above the ocean surface, and in places inundated the coastline up to 2 kilometers inland, which itself had disastrous consequences. The wave had by this point already claimed thousands of lives on the island and caused extensive damage to property. And although the eastern part of the island, which was exposed directly to the source of the earthquake, had already been hit, the worst was yet to come. Most of Sri Lanka's tourist resorts were located on the southwest and west coasts of the island, which were seemingly protected from the more massive impact of the tsunami. However, even in Sri Lanka, happened a natural phenomenon we already talked about in the video on Indonesia, namely wave diffraction, which means the wave behind an obstacle bends from its original direction and enters an area that is initially shaded from the wave, leading to a noticeable amplification of the wave. In Sri Lanka, this phenomenon has happened on a much larger scale than in the smaller islands of the Indonesian coast, leading to a tragedy of unprecedented proportions. Water on the west coast flooded local tourist resorts and towns. As the wave progressed northwards, its effect grew incredibly stronger, as it can be seen in the footage from the town of Galle, where the wave caught residents completely by surprise and claimed thousands of lives in that town alone. The harbor areas of the city were completely destroyed. There is well-known footage from the famous Eden resort further north, which was suddenly swept away and, particularly on the coast, many unsuspecting foreign tourists who were spending the Christmas holiday there perished. The area between Galle and the Eden resort was one of the worst affected areas of Sri Lanka. It was here, 15 miles north of Galle, near the town of Peraliya, that the tsunami showed its deadliest face. Train number 50 was a regular service that ran between the capital Colombo and the city of Galle. On Sunday, December 26th, during the ongoing Buddhist festival of the full moon and also during the ongoing Christmas holidays, the train left the Fort station in the capital Colombo at 6:50 a.m. The train carried 1,500 paying and an unknown number of non-paying passengers. One thing is certain, the train was completely overcrowded. At the Devastation station, an attempt to stop the train by the central control room, which had already been informed of the ongoing tsunami on the island, failed because all station staff was helping to get the train out and no one was available to answer the phone until the train had left the station. The trains in Sri Lanka at that time were not equipped with mobile phones or radios, so the train set out to meet its horrible fate. Around 9:30 in the morning, a few kilometers ahead of the train, near the village of Peraliya, gigantic walls of water were seen, destroying everything in their path. At this point, the train had to stop because the tracks in front of it were already underwater. People were fleeing towards the shore, yet there was no sign of what was coming. The water was stagnant and resembled lagoons after the rains, rather than the remnants of the first wave that had passed through. However, as soon as the train stopped, the locals immediately began to make their way into the train and onto its roof, as they believed it would save them from what was coming. On the contrary, some of the passengers and train staff ran out of the trains, as they did not understand the situation and ran to find out what was happening. Suddenly, a flood of fast-moving water rushed through the vegetation up to the floor level of the carriages, which it flooded, causing great panic among the passengers. This panic lasted for about 5 minutes, when suddenly, with a tremendous rumble and roar, another foaming wave, this time reaching halfway up the palm trees, rolled in and swept all 8 cars off the tracks like toys and carried them several hundred meters into the jungle. The force of the water is evidenced by the fate of the 120-ton Manitoba locomotive 591, which was thrown 328 feet off the tracks. The tracks were twisted and in places completely overturned. The disaster claimed lives of about 2,000 people, 900 of whose bodies were never being recovered. Given the number of victims, this makes it the deadliest rail disaster in human history. Ironically, just 20 miles north of the disaster, the capital city of Colombo was only hit by weak waves, a few tenths of centimeters high. The tsunami claimed 35,322 lives in Sri Lanka, placing it second only to Indonesia, where a tsunami killed 168,000 people. There are many memorials to the disaster in Sri Lanka now, which are intended to serve as an eternal reminder of the terrifying power of the elements and their control over our destinies. Friends, almost simultaneously with Sri Lanka, India was also hit, but we will talk about that again in the next part of our series. Thank you so much for watching this video. It will make me happy if you give us a subscribe, a like and a bell, and I look forward to seeing you next time.